Welcome back to another episode of Straight Talking Leadership with me, Chris Pienkowski. My special guest this week is Jamie Tilke. Jamie's journey from humble beginnings in upstate New York to a distinguished 24-year career in the special operations community epitomizes resilience and relentless pursuit of excellence. Starting as a young newspaper delivery boy, Jamie's early work ethic and diverse experiences included a stint as a budding rock star. Hope we get into that. Instilled in him deep-seated drive for success. After retiring from the Army in 2020, Jamie ventured into entrepreneurship, co-founding an upscale boutique hotel for traveling military service members, reflecting his commitment to serving others. His story is a testament to the transformative power of hard work and unwavering ambition. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to be on.
Oh, man, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great show. So one thing that I do before we get into our conversation around leadership is a quick warm-up that I call the Mad Minute. The Mad Minute is just a couple questions. They have nothing to do with leadership. It's all about just warming up that gray matter between our ears and getting us into a flow. So are you ready for the Mad Minute?
Absolutely.
All right. Question number one. If you could transform any one animal into the size of an elephant, what would it be?
You definitely, man, I didn't anticipate that. Man, I don't want anything that's going to be bigger and going to destroy us easily, but I guess at that size, it really doesn't matter. I don't know. An ant. Let's go with an ant, because that dude can already lift like 1,000 times his weight. So can you imagine that? That dude would be freaking bench pressing countries.
He would. So an ant the size of an elephant. Holy smokes, man. I couldn't even imagine that.
What's an average elephant weigh? Like what, 1,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds? I'm probably way off.
Probably more than that.
That dude could bench like 500,000 pounds.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It is impressive. Awesome. All right, man. Question number two. You've got your choice. Anyone in the entire world. Who is one person that you would want to have as a dinner guest?
George Washington.
George Washington. I like it.
Yeah.
Why would you pick George Washington?
I mean, there's a lot of historical figures similar that I would want, but the reason why I picked him right off is because, well, he was our first president, and a lot of what our country is founded on. Obviously, he had an integral role. I understand there's obviously everybody from the Constitution, but the point is coming back from that time and all the things that he must have been processing from, coming from, England and being over here, and just all. I would love to sit there and have a conversation with him about how all of that came to be, right? And some of the, we talk about the trials and tribulations. I mean, what would that talk be like? Listening straight from him, like on the stuff that some of us may not even ever known,
Exactly.
I just think it'd be amazing.
Me too. I think, George Washington, so much historical significance to our country. But I would love to have dinner with any of those founding fathers.
Yes,
I think
agreed.
they would all bring a different perspective, all focused around the same thing, being, freedom and liberty. And, but I think the one that would be most fun would probably be Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
I think that guy would have the best stories.
Oh, I mean, come on. In fact, I would say that my latter part of my career was somewhat similar, with as far as like diplomatic services. And so I've thought about him sometimes and I was like, man, what would that have been back like, hundreds of years ago versus what I've, done in my career. But yeah, it would probably be a tie between George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Ben Franklin would be pretty sweet, but again, significant, at a time when the country was in complete and utter turmoil, which I would say is not too dissimilar than today right now. So thinking about some of the strategic, and who was mentoring and guiding him. I'm sure he was an incredibly intelligent person and strategist, but I also have zero doubts that there's also people talking to him.
Yep, for sure. So Jamie, thanks for playing along. The Mad Minute, no one ever anticipates those questions. So, it's always just gonna get us rocking and rolling. So,
Love it.
the whole purpose of this show is to talk about leadership. It's to share lessons learned, successes, failures, etc., with other people so that they can learn from it, apply those lessons, and put them into work in their lives. So, I want to jump into early on, you were entrepreneurially minded, work ethic as a paper boy in upstate New York. But what was your first leadership experience and how did that go?
I was thinking about that before we started this, and it's really hard. If you don't mind, I'm just going to give a little preamble to kind of make my
Absolutely.
answer make sense. And that
Yeah.
is like, look, I grew up super, super poor. I mean, at times we lived in a tent and we lived in a car, like that level of poor. And so for me, even being a paper route boy was not about um, a strategic plan. It was about changing my circumstances, period. Right.
Mhm.
I just need money. Like I don't want to live like this. I don't want Salvation Army cheese. I don't want to wear somebody else's pants. Like I want to change my life circumstances. So leadership is one of those things, and that's why you have this podcast. And I reached out to be on your podcast because I think leadership is a very critical thing to understand and to do the best job you can at applying it. But if I'm being completely honest, even with my 24 years of service, I never really thought about it. And to somebody listening, they might be like, dude, that's insane. Like military is all about leadership. Yes, I know that. I'm not saying I didn't do it. What I'm saying is I didn't study it, right? So for me to answer that question, I think what I'm going to say to you is if I had to reflect back on what I think the first time is that I actually had leadership was in the military. Um, I'm sure there's other things that I did. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back. So you said you wanted to touch on the rock star. Here we go.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And so right about the time when all the hair bands were going wild, Guns N' Roses, Poison, Warrant, Slaughter, all that stuff, right? I was like, I'm going to be a rock star, period. It's going to happen. Bought a guitar, started practicing. I wanted the lifestyle. I wasn't passionate about music, which is why I don't think it worked out for me, right? Because you gotta really, really want that.
Yeah.
But that's not the story. The leadership, I think, and this is something I would not have recognized when I was 18 years old. I remember saying to my buddy, we were in a little barn, our band, we were practicing the barn. And so I said to my buddy, I go, I'm going to play out. I'm going to play out before we graduate high school. And he's like, come on, dude, shut up. Like, you guys don't even, first of all, you can't get into a bar. And second of all, is like, you guys have a half of a band. You don't have a full band. And I was like, I'm going to make it happen. And so when you talk about leadership skills, like, I think that's one of the strengths that I've always had. In fact, I would say it's probably one of my top greatest gifts is to be a visionary, right? And then not only to see the vision, but be relentless in that pursuit of it. Like, don't talk to me about how we can't. Let's talk to me about how we can. And so how that kind of panned off, and I'm going to just summarize so that I don't take too much of your time on your show explaining this. But what ultimately ended up having, I had no money to fund the deal. So we grew up in a small town in upstate New York. So the hangout for all of the high school kids on the weekend was this roller skating rink. So I went to the owners at the roller skating rink and I was like, hey, I want to play out. And they're like, oh, I don't know, like, how's that going to work? And blah, blah, blah. Anyway, after some deliberation said, hey, we're going to set up a stage in the center of the rink. And then everybody else can still skate around it. And then everybody else that wants to watch it can sit outside the rink and can watch the show. So that's what happened. They agreed. I said, listen, I don't want any residual income. Whatever money you make off of people coming here, it's all yours. I just want the opportunity to play out. Again, negotiating. But and so ultimately, I ended up having some other girls in high school that may have liked the fact that I had long hair that helped me fund the project. And so then I went to another local band who was popular, who was playing out in all the bars during the college and everything like that. And I said, hey, Pete was the lead singer. I was like, bro, I need you. And then I need the bass player, whose name was Shane. I said, I need you guys. We have the other guitar player. I was the rhythm. The other guy was lead. And we had the drummer. And so we put the band. I said, I just need you for one night so I can fulfill my dream. I want to play out before I graduate high school. And so we did that. So in summary, like when you talk about leadership, again, I would not have looked at that back before and said that required leadership skill traits. But the reality is it did. Right. And so I put that concept into play, and I was able to corral, right, influence, motivate, inspire, however you want to put it, all these other people to do these things in order to be able to help that come. So that's my first recollection of actually something to do with leadership.
And that is 100% leadership, right? This is a dream, this is a goal. I'm going to rally people around this goal, and we're going to figure out how we're going to make this happen. I like what you said. I don't want to talk about how we can't do this. Let's talk about how we can do this.
Yep.
I don't remember if when we talked a little while ago, if I'd mentioned like growing up, by today's standards, we would have been considered like working poor. So, I sympathize with what you're talking about. And through my own entrepreneurial journey, I started in a very similar way of I'm not doing this for fun. I'm doing this to change my circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And my mindset, even to this day, and I'm 50, so we're very similar in age, but my mindset is spend imagination before spending money. And that comes from that background of not having money and trying to figure out how am I going to get something done that is going to move me forward. So like in my mind, imagination is endless. Your bank account isn't always endless. So I tell that to people who are just starting out, people who are in a brand new leadership position where they don't have that built up like leadership capital. All right, let's get creative. You want to achieve a goal? Let's figure it out. Let's think outside the box, and let's help you achieve that. So, I love that because you negotiated, you saw the issues, and you got other people to believe in your dream in order to basically dedicate their time to a Friday night or a Saturday night, whatever it was, to play this show, and it all worked out.
It did. And look, there's a book. I was listening to you talk about it, and then thinking about what I had said. And one book that I love is by Damon John called The Power of Broke. And in summary, it's very similar to what you're saying, which is if you got nothing left to lose, then how can that, or let's go another layer deeper, right? Like if you're in traumatic circumstances, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a loss or something super, but I'm just saying your circumstances suck, right? Is that going to help drive you or push you in order to be able to do that? And that's exactly what you're saying, and what I'm saying. And I was like, I'm not going to let my circumstances dictate whether or not I can or cannot do that. Not. So.
And that is, I mean, those early experiences are what shape us as leaders. And it also gives us a different dimension to be able to have conversations with people and, talk to people. I'm sure now from your years in the military and throughout your career, you can probably be put in a room with just about anybody and have some kind of conversation, find some ways to make a connection. And that's huge for leadership. I mean, would you agree to that?
Yeah, 100%. And again, like I've gotten a little bit more comfortable, right? Sometimes I don't want to sit there and say, "Oh, I'm good at this and good at that." But, I definitely think again another skill trait that I was blessed with was the ability to be able to communicate. In fact, on this slight tangent, if you will, but
Sure.
I have five kids, and every parent wants to do the same thing, right? How can I set my kids up for success so that they don't have to experience the stuff that I did? Whether that's coming from, modest lifestyle or maybe educating, whatever point. So I give my kids 3 books every single time they graduate from high school. I give them Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, listen, this is your financial literacy. This is your baseline, right? If your money's not making your money, you're losing. That's number one. Number two is I give them Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this is what I tell them. And this is to the point that I'm trying to make right now with what you just said. I'm like, I consider this a 100 series course. A lot of people talk about, oh, that thing was written back in the 1920s or 30s. And like, it's not relevant. I think it's still relevant. I still think the vast majority of it has circumstances changed. Yes, it is. But my point is it's the baseline. And if you have the ability to be able to communicate and then connect with people, and that's John Maxwell's book. If you can't tell, I read a lot of books, right? John, everybody communicates, but few people connect. That's what I tell my kids. I go, there's your 300 series course. Like, you got to take that one, and you got to be able to connect with people. And that takes a lot of active listening. It takes, being able to have common ground with other person. If you're a fisherman and then all of a sudden I'm a fisherman, like you and I could probably talk for hours, right? But if you're not, then it's strained. It's not really authentic. It's a little bit challenging. It's more like small talk. But in summary, communication, I think is critical. And in fact, let me just say this just because it's fresh, right? I'm trying to be delicate about how I'm going to say this, but even inside my family dynamics, there's significant issues with certain things sometimes. And I tell my wife, I said, if you can't communicate, I'm not talking about her, I'm talking about other people in our extended family. If you can't communicate, like I don't know what to do. Like I can't sit there and give you all of me and then you never reciprocate. And if we're not having an open dialogue, then it's absolutely futile. And I might as well just smash my fingers in the door.
You're right. And I mean, I always talk about communication being the foundation of leadership, right? If you can't communicate, and well, let me back up before I go deeper. Communication, and a lot of people don't understand this, is a two-way street. It's the way that we provide and receive information, right? Communication is not just the words that are coming out of my mouth or my body language. People don't even account for body language when it comes to communication, even though that's the majority of it.
Yep.
It's also the way that we receive information and ask clarifying questions. So you have to be able to communicate as a leader, which means the words that you speak and your active listening, asking for clarification. Because if you're not on the same page, then now you both leave the conversation and you're off in different directions, and the chances of you achieving that common goal are significantly reduced.
Yeah, 100%. And I will throw one more thing, is your ability to be able to some extent, you have to be able to emotionally, like, I don't want to say emotionally detached, but you have to be able to control your emotions. I could say something to you right now that's going to piss you off, and you're going to be like, bro, like, what's your problem? You know what I mean? But I think then you take in all the other there's so many variables to this, but right. It's like, okay, well, who is Jamie? Is he reflective? Is he going to listen to what I'm saying? Is he going to, sometimes I would come back to my wife and I'd say, it would be 24 hours. And I'll say to her, I would be like, you win. And so the first couple of times I said that to her, she's like, can you stop saying that? Because I don't like that. I go, what do you mean you don't like that? She's like, because I don't think you're being serious. I go, I'm 100% being serious. I'm telling you that I was adamant about the fact that I believe that this was true. You made your argument. I went to sleep that night. I thought about it. And I said, you know what? She's 100% right. So the next stage in that is I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say to you, you were right. Now, if you don't want me to use the words, you win. Okay, I'll leave it out. I was trying to keep it cute and humorous. But if that's not funny to you, that's fine. Then I'll just simply say, I now understand what you were saying to me, and I won't say that again or do that again or whatever the situation is. So you nailed the fact that it's got to be a two-way communication, and that person has to be able to receive the information. This is what I tell my kids. You got to be able to receive the information. You got to think about it, understand what you think that person's ulterior motives are, or maybe they have no ulterior motives, right? So it's both those diametrically opposed viewpoints. And then you can pick and choose how you respond. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll hand it back to you. I'm sorry, I know I'm being long-winded.
No, you're good.
But I also tell my kids all the time, I say, listen to me, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So if you come to me and you say, Dad, that's effed up and you're stupid. Well, guess what? You just triggered me. And now if I don't have the communication skills that I have, I'm going to have a hard time processing that. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm your father. So I'm probably going to have some difficult challenges with the fact that you just addressed me like that. Or you could come to me and you say, you know what, Dad? I thought about what you said. You have some excellent points, However, here's the reason why I don't agree with you. And then you can lay out your line. I can guarantee you there's an exponentially greater chance that I'm going to listen to that and say, wow, A, I'm impressed that you just delivered your message to me that way. And B, I'll think about that. That actually makes sense. And then you might actually win the argument. So again, I just wanted to throw in that part about being able to control your emotions, even though innately we as human beings sometimes, especially like, sorry, man, I know I keep saying,
You're
if
good.
somebody says something about my driving, it's a trigger for me. And the reason why it's a trigger is because I was an over the road truck driver for 2 years. And I think I was a pretty darn good truck driver. I was the only person in my class to parallel park a 48-foot semi trailer on the first try. So when my wife is like, hey, you might want to, I was like, easy, Tiger. Like, I got this. I'm good. I've had tons of combat driving courses in the military as well. So evasive driving, I'm good. You're safe. Anyway, I'll hand it back, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. And you're absolutely right. We, as leaders, if you get hung up in the emotion of what's being communicated to you, that is going to affect how you make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're able to remove that emotion, when it's appropriate, right? There are times that you need to let that emotion show, whether it's because you're showing praise to somebody, like you don't want to just be flat, like, hey, good job. No, you
Mm-hmm.
want to let your emotion show that you're proud of the way that your son just said that to you, or you're proud of, the huge accomplishment that your team just made. Like, yeah, let it out. But if we can't, I guess, control or know when to regulate that emotion, then you're ineffective as a leader.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of person that can't control your emotions, then your people never know what to expect, because it's like, hey, one day I'm getting Jamie, the nice guy, and another day someone may say something while they're getting coffee and it turns Jamie into the asshole, and I don't know who to deal with, who I'm going to get. So therefore everyone's walking on eggshells. But
Yeah.
if you're able to be consistent and, put especially the negative emotions, like that comes back to
Yes.
what you said very early on of, let's talk about how we can do this, not how we can't. Putting those negative emotions aside, it is really helpful from a leadership standpoint, because it keeps everyone focused on the positive and like, no, we're here to overcome challenges. We're not here to let challenges win. Um, but that's something else that, it's all about motivating people, and people take your cue. If you're being negative, then guess what? What are the chances that those people in their minds are like, are we going to accomplish this? Probably not.
Yeah. I love the word that you used, regulate, because that's exactly what I was trying to articulate. And so, in the military, in certain training environments, there's kind of a methodology, and we call it a tactical pause. And
Mhm.
so that's like, okay, you just received the information. Maybe your skin's starting to tingle because you're so pissed off, or maybe your heart's at like 120 because you're like, I'm gonna, you know, well, if it for number one, if it's too extreme, then you probably should step away from the situation, right? There's we're obviously not lining out the circumstances to its complete, but you get the picture, right? And so that I just tell people, take that tactical pause, because I'm telling you, sometimes even just taking 2 to 3 seconds to process what that person said and what the intent of what they said, and you brought it up earlier, clarifying. So if there is doubt in your mind, then you might want to rephrase it. But ultimately, if you're able to communicate like that, then typically the resolution process is going to be significantly better, right? And you're going to come out
But
winning out for both people.
exactly. And if you don't take that tactical pause, and now your ego is getting involved.
Mm-hmm.
And, most people, as soon as the ego gets involved, now the sights are set on winning. And it's winning at whatever cost. And even if that means me recognizing inside that I did something wrong, but now I can't because my ego is in the way. And I'm not going to come back in 24 hours and say, I thought about it and you win. or you're just riding high on that ego. And that is also something like leaders need to be able to tell their people, you know what, I made a mistake. This is how I'm going to correct it. But you can't try to be the picture of perfection because people see right through that without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm assuming, given the name of your show, if you haven't read it, you've at least heard about it. You know Simon Sinek's book,
Oh, yeah.
What's Your Why?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So that's a perfect piece of that is, yeah.
Yeah. So Jamie, let's talk about, I mean, you've probably seen over, 24 years in the military, you've seen good leaders and you've seen not so good leaders. I know that everyone thinks that, there's so much leadership training that happens in the military, especially in like the special operations community, but that doesn't mean that everyone is a good leader. Can we talk about what are some of the things that you've seen that you admire in good leaders? And then we'll circle back to what are some things that you've seen that you're like, man, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. Well, we've hit on some of them. And I mentioned this before we jumped on, but I actually have a list right off here to my screen on the right. That's why I was looking at it, talking just about summarizing the 10 top traits of leadership. And we've already touched on some of them. Decision making, I think, not decision making, excuse me, communication
Mhm.
is significant. But we just talked about that. So I would say another, I think, well, this kind of goes to my reference to Simon Sinek's book, Integrity and Honesty. During that book, when I read that, he says there, he's like, call the three people that you think know you the best and ask them in a single word, what one single word best describes your most positive attribute. And so I called them. I called my best friend. I called my sister, and I called another friend. And every single one of them said the same word. They said authenticity. And I'm bringing that up because, again, it's kind of an underpinning of integrity and honesty. And so I think the reason why that's a significant trait that's great to have as a leader, that I've also seen demonstrated too. I'm not trying to make this just about me, but like talking about what you asked, which is seeing that, is because people tend to respect that, right? Is like, I don't think he's a snake oil salesman. I think he's genuine with what he's thought. And again, back to delivery. If it's the whole thing with where people joke about it with your wife, right? Your wife comes out and she says, hey, Chris, what do you think of this dress? Well, you can tell her, babe, it looks great, even though it looks trashy on her, right?
Mhm.
But then she's gonna be more mad because she went out and you let her be exposed looking trashy. Or you could have just said to her, you said, babe, I love it. Great color. Personally, my opinion is I don't think it looks that great on you. I wouldn't wear it. That's my opinion. But I think, again, that may, for the moment, in that few moments, it might upset her. But I think ultimately she's going to come back and she's going to say, I appreciate your honesty and candidness. And again, how did Chris deliver it? Did Chris deliver and be like, man, you're disgusting? But like, what are you doing? So anyway, I going off on all these little side tangents. My point is I think integrity, honesty, that authenticity is a great attribute because I think it's easier to rally the troops. I'll stick with your verbiage that you used earlier. I love the military, vernacular. So yeah, it allows you to rally the troops because people, they like to follow that. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah. And what have you seen that has backfired on leaders that you're like, man, was that person like, did they study the same stuff that I studied about leadership? Like, what have you seen go off the rails? And I mean, you don't have to, obviously don't use names or anything like that, but things that stuck with you as a lesson of what not to do.
Accountability and responsibility. That's it, man. Like, because you just said it earlier, right? Is like being able to admit when you made a mistake. Again, that's something that people respect.
Mhm.
Um, Look, everybody wants to be a rock star. Everybody wants to make great decisions. Everybody wants to have all the right answers. We all do. But can you be humble enough? Can you admit, again, it goes back to me with that story I told you about my wife. Hey, babe, you won. Like, don't say that. No, you did. Like, you have an excellent point. You were right. And so I think that when I've seen a few things go off the rails, I mean, one particular instance, like you said, without mentioning things, one of the they were 100% in the wrong, and it was 100% their fault. But rather, because they had the power, rather than bringing people together and coming out in front of him and saying, you know what, I recognize that this was a mistake, and give their explanation, I think people would appreciate that and have changed. But instead, he not only stuck by it, but he punished the entire organization for his mistake. What the hell just happened? And so I don't have to tell you that, needless to say, a lot of the troops were pissed, right? And they lost respect, and they didn't want to support that person, right? So now you want me to jump in front of a bullet for you? Come on, man. So I think, when you're asking about what's one thing that I've seen go wrong with my own two eyes, is people being so caught up in themselves, or in the situation, that they're not willing to take responsibility or accountability for their own actions or mistake. And with that, let me leave this, because it's something somebody said to me, and it really took me a while. I understood the words, but it took me a while to actually, absorb it. And that is, you are 100% responsible for everything that you do and fail to do in your life, period. It's no one else. That's it. Zip, zero, nada. Unless you are in some camp being tortured and whatnot. But I don't even want to go into hypotheticals, but I don't know why you got in that situation or why you ended there. What I'm saying is, you are directly responsible for everything that you do and fail to do. And you need to face the consequences of that, whatever that is.
You're absolutely right. And I would say that is outside of communication, which is where I think is probably the most lacking leadership, trait that people have. When I'm working with leaders, I tend to pinpoint communication, like right off the bat. Like, hey man, you're not being clear, concise, you're not listening. The second is often accountability and responsibility, because people get into these roles and they think that they're like Teflon. And you know what? No, I'm just going to make an excuse. I'm not going to take this, on my chin. And what happens is exactly what you said. People lose respect. People lose, am I really going to follow you? Do I believe anything that you just said? So, I'll often talk about this concept of leadership capital. And when you do not take accountability, when you do not take responsibility, you are depleting your bank account of leadership capital, because the old saying is that trust is earned by drops and it's lost in buckets. So when you can't say, I screw that up, or you throw someone else under the bus, man, you've just dumped out your entire bucket. And
Yep.
good luck with any of your existing people being willing to step up and do something for you, or you asking for a favor. And now all of a sudden, everyone's got every excuse in the book as to why they can't do this favor for you. It's really because you're an asshole and you're not taking accountability and you're throwing people under the bus.
Amen. That's all I'm going to say. Amen. Yeah. Amen. That's 100% accurate right there. For sure.
So thinking back over your career, and it doesn't have to be your military career, what would you say is your biggest leadership accomplishment?
Yeah. I'm going to try to summarize it. I don't want to be too long-winded.
Okay.
As you can tell, I like to, my mouth tends to flap pretty long. So there was a situation where I talk about the special operations community writ large, not a single organization, but or a single unit, but the entire organization. We were PNG'd from a country, and that stands for persona non grata, which means you no longer are welcome here.
Yep.
For any of the listeners that don't know. And so a very high ranking individual, very high. It was his initiative to want to regain and rekindle that relationship because strategically we needed that relationship. And I'm talking about with other government entities. Okay. So I was representing the United States military, specifically the Army. But the other diplomatic people that represent the United States government in that particular country did not want us there because of episodes that had happened historically. So, long story short, there had been some initial rekindling, if you will, a couple small engagements, and we had gotten to this point where, my immediate commander had come up to me and said, "Hey, we need to rebuild this relationship. We need to be quite literally invited back into the house, and we feel like you're the perfect candidate for that. Your ability to communicate, to resonate with others, vision, stuff like that." So he's like, "I'm going to send you over there for 2 weeks, and I need you to do one of three things. Either one, get them to come back for an engagement. Two, get them to allow us to come there for a school. Or three, the golden Willy Wonka ticket is if you can get them to agree to let you stay there, like I'll give you the whole, everlasting stopper and the factory." And so I said, "Okay, fair enough. I'm going to go." And here's the greatest thing about this too. I'm talking about for me personally, is that for one of the first times in my military career, I was given my right and left limits, and that's it, right? Don't go over here. Don't go over here. But we trust your ability to come up with a vision, your ability to execute the plan. And so I came back 2 weeks later, and my commander says to me, "How did it go?" I said, "I got a school within the next 30 days to one of their classes. I also got permission to get you one engagement within the next 90 days with one of their tier 1 assets. And I also got invited back for 30 days, possibly up to 90 days, to work inside one of the other offices for one of the other agencies." And he's like, he's like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Bro, how did you do that?" So, I think the answer to your question is I'm very proud of that moment for a few reasons. It ultimately led me to where I'm sitting, here with you today, which is at one point, I know crap was, now I don't want to over embellish the story. Yes, I was there in a singleton capacity by myself, but clearly I had other people in and around me outside of visual that were helping to support what it is that I was ultimately trying to achieve. Right. So, but 30 days turned into 60 days, 60 turned into 90, 90 turned into 6 months. And I ended up being there for a year, and then with follow-on people. And so the reason why I say it's such a great accomplishment is because after that had all played out and I came back home, I literally was sitting in the hotel in Hawaii. And I remember I was saying to myself, this dude right here, this poor dude, no college education, no, grew up super poor, like I said, and all these other things. Like I was literally negotiating or building, if you will, between a 2-star general, a United States ambassador, and a commander. I was just like, that's amazing. And so I was very proud of what I had accomplished for the betterment of, honestly, not just my organization, but the entire United States government, right? Because ultimately, back to our earlier points of talking about bickering and not being able to come to resolution, like it's not doing you any justice not to have us there. And we also can be value added to the situation. And we need to build those relationships for other reasons and strategic and long-term objectives and stuff like that. And so that's when I called my wife and I said, "We're going to become real estate millionaires." And she's like, "Shut up, man." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, if this guy can work at that level, I'm like, why am I not building an empire for ourselves? So anyway, this podcast is not about that. So I don't want to digress into that. I apologize.
Sure.
But my point is that's probably, in my humble opinion, one of my greatest accomplishments was being able to do that. And let me just add you this one thing for somebody that might be in a similar situation. People say, what do you attribute that to? Besides your innate or, learned skills that you acquired in order to be able to be effective in that capacity. I said, I think that was probably the first time in my 24 years in the military where my chain of command believed in me so much that they did not dictate anything. I had a lot of latitude, right? You tell us what you need for support, we're here for you. And because of that, there was no constraints, there was no shackles. And it was like, awesome. So that was a very long one, Chris, but I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. And I really like that example because one of the things that I often talk about from a leadership standpoint is to utilize your team to the best of their ability to understand that you can't do everything. You shouldn't be doing everything. And when you delegate to the people on your team, you're really empowering them, right? I'm a big fan of giving people limits of authority, just like you talked about. Hey, what's my left limit? What's my right limit? Now I have trust in you to operate within these limits. Let's give you some examples of escalation points. Try to get that one out. But at what point do you need to get me involved? At what point do you just need to put something on my radar? And otherwise, like, you're free to rock and roll. When you do that to people, and you just talked about it, like, great example. You probably came out of that thing feeling so pumped up, right? You accomplished the mission. You felt like you had buy-in. You had accountability for whether it went right or wrong. But them saying, all right, Jamie, this is the overall intent of what needs to happen. These are your limits to make it happen. Dude, how great did you feel without that oversight? Without someone asking you, all right, when are you going to turn left? When are you going to, step on it? Like, you just had to operate. But as a result, you bought in, right?
Yeah.
Were there any questions along the way of, like, am I doing this right or wrong?
No, in fact, let me just say this. I told you that 30 turned into 60, 60 turned into 90, 90 to 6 months a year. The further that I got down the pipeline, the more that I rekindled the relationship and got additional, for lack of a better term, permissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
To operate in a certain way, the more latitude that I got. In fact, there was a very memorable moment for me that I'm literally will never forget. Hesitated whether I should say it, but I'm going to say it because there's nobody's names involved. It's fine. So at that time, my rank was a chief warrant officer too. So decent rank, but there's still several people significantly higher than me. Excuse me, sorry. We were on a we call it a VTC, a video teleconference, and literally the 2-star general and his entire staff is sitting on the other side of the cameras. And so when they get to my portion and they're talking about the country that I was in, one of his staff members, a full bird colonel, stood up and said, I don't think that we should do that because of blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2-star general looked at him and he said, unless CW2 Tilke says that that's what we're going to do, we ain't doing it. Sit down. And after that meeting, the other chief of staff called me and he goes, bro, he's like, how did that feel? And I was like, amazing. Not because I want that dude to be belittled, but that right there, to answer your question, I had gained so much confidence in my ability to do what it is that they asked me to do and even get more outcome faster than they ever anticipated. They thought this was going to be a 1 to 2 year thing. By 4 months in, 6 months in, I had already significantly exceeded their expectations. And so that was, to your point, it not only made me feel incredibly great, but it made me fully comprehend, like, wow, like that was a bold statement. They clearly have a lot of trust and confidence in my ability to not only get the mission done, but to continue to drive this forward. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
The confidence that you show to the people that you lead has so much of an impact on the outcomes that they're able to achieve. And this happens, like, I talk about leadership being in every part of your life. So this isn't just about business or the military. It's the way that we show up for our family. It's the way that we show up for ourselves. But for me, like, I've got 3 teenage sons. When we're talking about things and I'm kind of instilling that confidence in them, like, hey, I believe in what you're doing. You've got a great track record for doing X. And no matter what anyone else says, this is your ball to run with. That goes so far, like the psychological impact of that from a leadership standpoint. And I can't encourage people enough to let their people do what they're going to do. Acknowledge that sometimes mistakes are going to be made.
Yep.
And unless it's going to be catastrophic and it's going to be catastrophic and you can kind of steer them away from it, excuse me, let them scrape their knees because people learn from that as well.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Leaders will often say, I don't delegate because no one else can do it as good as I can. That's bullshit. And how many lessons have you learned from making a mistake, whether or not you acknowledge the mistake or not? How many times did you learn from, like, man, not going to do that again?
Yeah. And look, this also goes back to something you said a little bit earlier. I mean, okay, maybe there is a specific individual that's not specifically designed for that specific task that you have. Okay, then repurpose that person.
Right.
But it's not definitively you all day and day. Especially right now, like I kind of alluded to it earlier, but since I retired, I've started multiple companies, over 10 of them. And it actually, I'm not saying that in a bragging way because that was way too much and I had to end up, eating some crow, if you will, and realizing a bunch of my mistakes. That's not my point. My point is that, wait, what did you just say? We were talking about, I'm trying to remember, what did you just say?
Let people scrape their knees and learn lessons from their mistakes.
Yeah. So that's exactly it, is that, figuring that out and then repurposing people. Not everybody's cut from the same cloth and other people can be repositioned. And again, another great leadership trait is your ability to recognize that, right? If Chris is the best at freaking, working on the car, then, and oh yeah, by the way, so this is another thing I used to say. I say, 1, if they got the skill set, fantastic. 2, if they have the passion, okay, it's a no-brainer. Like if that dude, in fact, now I may take some heat for this but for me, I always constantly say, I would take somebody with greater passion and less skill than somebody with skill who can't stand what they're doing. Because that person that has the passion is going to catch up with that other person. I'm absolutely confident about there. And ultimately, the quality of work is going to be significantly better because they actually give a crap about what it is that they're doing. So, yeah, anyway, I know that was a little bit of a digression.
No, but I couldn't agree more. So this is something that I'll often talk to business owners about, or senior executives when they're thinking about either the next promotion of people that are kind of down chain from them, or I need to hire someone. Look, there are 2 things that I'll put above skill every single day. It's your passion and your cultural fit within the organization, right? You can't teach passion and you can't train for values. If someone's values are not aligned with your organization, I don't care what skill level they have, they're going to create a toxic environment. They're going to create resentment around all the other people that are aligned around your values and your culture. So if you've got 2 candidates neck and neck, and you've got one with greater skills, but you've got the other who has greater passion and there's a values alignment, I take that person every single day of the week, because you can teach skills, but you can't teach passion and you can't teach values.
Yeah. No, I so much agree with that. Yep. 100%, Chris.
So what are some of the things now that, I mean, you've been out of the military for 4 years now, you're on your entrepreneurial journey. What have you used from your time in the military, of whether it was leading people, accomplishing missions, to how are you using that in your civilian world and in your entrepreneurial ventures? What crosses over from one world to the other?
Well, I just recently was on another show, and I had told them. So for the listeners, yes, I served in special operations, but with inside that, as a United States Army Special Forces Green Beret, our primary mission set is what's referred to as unconventional warfare.
Mhm.
And in unconventional warfare, um, I think that all of the skill sets that I refined. Some of them I was taught, but I really believe that some of my strengths that I pointed out to you, I've always had the innate ability, and then the Army did an exceptional well of helping me craft those skills at a better point. Um, I almost sometimes feel like I'm at an unfair advantage, and I know that sounds super arrogant. I don't mean that in that way, but what I'm saying is I was just able to really hone those skills over 24 years of developing relationships on an international level, with people that speak other languages. So there's now, you talked about body language and paralinguistics and all these other neurolinguistics and all these other attributes. Now let's throw in cultural aspect.
Yeah,
Okay, well, that's a whole nother different thing. I can't point at you this way or use this finger or gesture or whatever, because that has other implications. So anyway,
yeah,
the answer to your question is this. I think the greatest thing that I've innately known, but the Army absolutely made me understand how valuable is the power of relationship capital, right? I'd say all the time, networking is everything. They used to play this game. It was called Seven Ways to Kevin Spacey or whatever. I don't know. And it's like, who can you name that was connected to who and who and who and who?
yeah,
I mean, with technology, I mean, a lot of times it's significantly less than seven. You don't even need seven anymore. But I'm just saying, so in one word, like when I'm mentoring and talking to people, I'm saying proximity is everything,
yes,
right? So if Chris is best friends with some famous musician, I'm one step away. So, and the reason why I was able to get that thing done in high school and play on that stage was, yes, because I rallied them and got them emotionally engaged and they wanted to support and stuff, but I also leveraged their relationships. Relationships are absolutely everything. So the reason why I look at people and I say, I don't want to hear why we can't, let's talk about how we can, is because in my humble opinion, virtually nothing is impossible. It's a question about who you know and are you or are you not willing to take action? Because if you're not willing to take action, then it's just process from Survivor. I got nothing for you. Head back to camp. You can sit there and eat your ice cream or your Doritos or whatever your favorite thing is, but I'm about ready. Let's get this done. Let's
yep,
go. Right. And so I think relationships are, I just think you can be an incredible communicator. You can be incredibly adaptable. You can have great decision making process. But if you don't, there's almost nothing that you're going to try to accomplish in the business world, or in the military, that you can't do with a team. Like, and that's the reason why I failed with the 10 businesses. I know you've heard the adage, an inch deep and a mile wide. I was an inch deep and 3 miles wide. So it's like, this is what I told my wife today. I go, you know what I did? I effectively stopped the boat from sinking, but that's it. But as far as actually having scalability and growth and being able to move, I wasn't moving nothing. I was just stopping it from drowning because I took on way too much. So again, back to simplifying, all I'm simply saying is relationships are everything. You need a team to be able to do virtually anything you want to do in any large capacity, unless you're just in your backyard whittling some wood and you want to make something, which is perfectly fine as well. But I'm simply saying relationships are everything, and your ability to be able to connect with people, which is why, in my humble opinion, you shouldn't be able to graduate high school without reading Dale Carnegie's book. Because again,
yeah,
that's your foundation. It's not everything, but it's absolutely a solid foundation.
yeah. No, you and I are so much on the same page there, and it's an old saying for a reason, that it's not what you know, but who you know. Relationships are so important. Um, and relationships, just like communication, have to be a two-way street.
Mm,
It's it's not always, you asking others, but it's you providing things for others. It's also cutting relationships off, and that's also part of leadership, right? When you've got someone who's a continuous taker, and when there's something that you need, and they've got every excuse in the book, like, you know what? I don't have time for people like that. Leaders shouldn't have time for people like that on their teams, who are continuously taking the resources from the team but not contributing to it. So relationships, two-way street, just like communication.
it's a hot button issue for me. If you can't tell, I had to readjust myself in the seat. It's not
Yeah.
because I have to go pee. It's because I'm listening to you and I'm like, don't even get me started, Chris, man, because I will run on for an hour. All I'm going to do is concur with you with every ounce of my being. Um, that is 100% spot on. And that's why I'm sure you know who Jim Rohn is, right? Famously says, you are the total sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most. So
Yes.
as I constantly tell people, if you want to be in and around the negative energy, go with it. I consider myself a very optimistic and positive and motivational person. Most of my friends around me are like, bro, man, when I'm around you, I'm ready to do shit. Let's do this, right? And I'm like, let's go. But I tell everybody, I'm like, it's way more difficult for you to take a negative person and bring somebody up than it is for the positive people to, or bring somebody down to the positive people to bring a negative person up.
Mhm.
I think I said that right? And so I'm 100% with you. It's a really difficult thing, particularly if it's a close friend or if it's a family member. But I'm here to tell you, if you really want to get all of the extraneous crap out of your life, that doesn't mean you can never see that person. It doesn't mean that you can never, but if that person is, yeah, I'm just picking this out. Like if that person's obesely overweight and they're criticizing you because you're 10 pounds overweight, why are you listening to that person?
That's right.
It makes absolutely zero sense to me.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't. So I can't agree with you more. Uh, Negativity, oh man, it just destroys you. There's so much more I want to say. That's why I'm like hemming and hawing and pausing. I'll just leave it right there, man.
No, you're good. And Jamie, I know that we're getting close. We've been talking for a while. I've got one last question before we wrap it up, and it's a question that I ask everybody, but what is your leadership philosophy?
Um, that's a great question because I never really thought about it too much until I was coming on to the show. So I don't know if I'll be completely honest. I need to think about that more moving forward. But I would say, for the context of your show, um, I think I'm going to culminate everything. Is it a
Yeah,
singleton thing or can I culminate it?
rock and
So I
roll.
think it's everything that we talked about, man. Communicate with people, reflect on what they said, try to be better, do better, right? You're not always right about everything. Inspire other people. I believe in the law of reciprocity, right? If I do good shit to you repeatedly, you're going to innately want to feel like you have to repay me in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean that's my expectation. I'm not going to lend you my car, Chris, and then say, you better let me borrow your Lambo. No, that's not my point. My
Right.
point is I helped you out in a time of need. I put your needs above my own, right? It's another great thing, takeaway from the military, is that if you are a part of something that's bigger than yourself, if there's a bigger purpose, right? Because when I joined the military, I wasn't a patriot. I want to say, let me rephrase that. I'm not saying I didn't love the country. What I'm saying is I didn't know what that really meant, right?
Sure.
I joined the military because I thought that they wore cool uniforms and I just finished watching Rambo. That's it, right? And that's why I joined the Army. But what I would tell you is, once I got in there and went to one of the Army's most elite, light infantry units, the 75th Ranger Regiment, that instilled patriotism into me, to be in and around those people and to be rallied behind, supporting and defending our nation and our constitutions. So, as far as my philosophy, I'm saying that all those little nuggets that I just dropped, I think that if you care about people and you can see the best in people and you authentically and genuinely want those people to be better, and you're leaning forward with your best intentions on trying to help that, like, it's very difficult not to inspire or help those or make those people want to be better and do better, which ultimately makes your team better, right? And you're going to be significantly more successful. Are there turds here and there? Yes, there are,
Yep.
and are some of those turds in your family? Yes, they are, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
And so are some of those turds in your great friendship circle? Yeah, they are. Again, back to my situation I said earlier. Okay, so your best friend from high school, maybe you have a beer, you talk, you catch up. What's the weather? You like sports? Yeah. And then that's it. But I'm not hanging out with that person. I'm not asking them for business advice.
Right.
Anyway, that's my leadership philosophy, Chris.
I like it. Jamie, before we wrap it up, any closing thoughts, anything you want to leave the audience with?
No, I think I'm doing something similar, but with different topics of discussion that you are. And so I think what I'm leaving with your audience is that I hope that there's just one piece of nugget in there that maybe helps frame something out differently for you or inspires you to consider something in a different way. But I guess I'm somewhat repeating myself, but I think just continue to educate yourself, right? I mean, we are in a time where it is unlimited knowledge and expertise out there in virtually anything that you want to do. And so continue to educate yourself, continue to surround yourself around winners, win with winners. And as my mentor says, sorry, my phone was vibrating. I'm going to say, as my mentor says to me, you are one relationship away from changing your life forever. I really believe that 100,000%. So if you're sitting here listening to this show and maybe you're a CEO or maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're inside somebody's company, or maybe you're working at Taco Bell or some other job or whatever it is, I'm just saying, if you have a dream, if you have a goal, if you have an aspiration, it's absolutely obtainable regardless of your circumstances, if you're willing to be able to surround yourself in and around people and move forward in that direction.
Awesome. That is an awesome quote. You're one relationship away from, is it changing your life or your next opportunity?
One relationship away from changing your life forever.
Dude, that's awesome. Jamie Tilke, how can people find you?
I just recently started a company as well, which is about entrepreneurship. And so it's called Vision in Motion. And my website is www.visioninmotion.co, not .com, but .co. I'm on Facebook with my name, Jamie Tilke, Instagram, and Jamie Tilke. So yeah, if somebody wants to reach out and connect, that'd be great.
Awesome. Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show. I know that people who are watching and listening are going to get something out of it. You're going to be able to, put into play in their own capacity as leaders. And if you are one of those people who got something out of this show, please like it. Please share it. Please subscribe to the channel so that you're getting as much leadership content as I'm able to pump out. I have interviews with interesting people like Jamie every single week. So please subscribe, share the show. And like I always say, until next time, lead on.